Hi, I'm Terry Arnold with Talk IBC, and I'd like to welcome Dr. Daniel Stover with me from Ohio. It's Ohio State Comprehensive Cancer Center, the James. Did I say it right?
Yep. You got it. Ohio State University Comprehensive Cancer Center and the James Cancer Hospital. Always long names, but yes, here in the Buckeye State.
It's Buckeye. I know. I hear people just refer to it as a Buckeye Hospital or the James, and we all know what they mean, but there is an official name, and I want to get it out there. Now, Dr. Stover, I am so delighted to be here with you today because I first met you a long time ago. I'm thinking it was maybe, it feels like a long time in the IBC world, 8 years ago when I was
Yeah, I was
asked to do a
thinking 8 or 10
presentation.
years ago. Uh-huh.
Yeah. Now, there's some personal things I want to talk about which help make this happen that Ohio has an IBC program. And so there's going to be a little bit of history told in here, but I also want you to share the accomplishments you've seen, the special challenges you've seen about starting a clinic for rare disease. And kudos to you, by the way. And then also, you've got some amazing research to talk about. And then we can kind of see where it goes from here in the future. So I'm going to jump in and ask questions because I don't want you to feel like you're just having to do a monologue, but I
Sounds
also
great.
want to give
Yeah.
you the space to say the things you want to get to say. So welcome.
Thank you. And thank you so much for having me. Have appreciated your friendship and partnership and advocacy for these years and excited to join you on this great podcast.
Well, terrific. Well, okay. I first met you when I was asked to give a talk because there was some, tremors about an IBC clinic, and it was led, honestly, out of relationships, as most things are. Dr. Lori Gilgrenham was a physician in Ohio. She knew a lot of physicians there also as well. She passed from IBC. She was quite passionate, and those doctors kept her memory alive and kept things going. And there was things that Lori wanted to see. And just in case you didn't know, I started the IBC Network Foundation at Lori's request. I met her in Houston when she was having to come to see about clinical trials, and she said, "I'm going to fight like crazy, but I don't think I'm going to make it. And there's something I need you to do." And how can you say no when someone asks you that? So here I am 12 years later. And
Wow.
then we met at that talk, and you instantly latched on with great passion to this program. But this isn't easy. So I'd like you to tell our listeners what unique challenges are there about starting a clinic focused on what is viewed as a rare and also highly fatal disease.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like you said, that personal connection is so valuable. So I came to Ohio State. I grew up here in Ohio, but I had done my training many different places. And the last stop where I was actually on faculty before coming to Ohio State was Dana-Farber Cancer Institute and Harvard Medical School, which has one of the few established, long-standing IBC programs. So when I was there, having expertise, focus, research, dedicated, expedited clinical access for IBC patients was something, honestly, I sort of took for granted. And, when I came to Ohio State, I think, we see over 7,500 unique breast cancer patients at Ohio State a year. So it's a high volume center, but just didn't have that experience and expertise and focus. And I think exactly like you said, that your visit and some of those connections really sort of spurred us to say, okay, we really need to take this to the next level. And I think the first thing we did was we looked around and said, Ohio State is in the center of, very large catchment areas. We have patients that come from West Virginia and in Indiana and Michigan and Kentucky. And while there are a number of IBC programs and a growing number, there aren't a lot of dedicated IBC programs here in the Midwest. And so we felt like that was an opportunity. And then we also, in sort of doing the research, reached out to colleagues and friends at established programs like Dana-Farber, MD Anderson, Duke, to find out what the best practices were. Because, before we jumped in both feet, we wanted to know, we didn't want to reinvent the wheel, number one. And number two, we wanted to do it the right way and the best way. And I think one of the things we learned very quickly is that there is a supportive community. It's not competition, it's partnership. And, everyone opened their doors and met with us and talked with us and provided their best practices and documentation, which I think probably sped up the development of our program by 6 to 12 months. And so we're incredibly grateful to that for that. But I think, the bottom line was, seeing that IBC care could be and research could be delivered at such a high level way from places like Dana-Farber and MD Anderson and Duke, seeing a need locally, which I think you also, had reinforced outreach from patients in Ohio saying, where should I go? What should I do? And then I think the passion and the motivation to do this, because this is the right thing. This is something that's needed. And this is an area where we felt like we could really help take a step forward with IBC care and research.
I want to jump in on this just for people who might not know about the history of IBC. It's been written about, we know, since the 1800s. But the first clinic in the world, literally in the world, opened, even though it's been treated, I know places, but the first clinic opened at MD Anderson in 2006. And then Dana-Farber came along after that, Duke came along after that. So to have a unique clinic, and this is technically the fourth, is really a rarity. And I don't think people know that. That doesn't mean you can't get treated somewhere, but it doesn't mean that there's a dedicated plan in the sense, because also there's not a national plan for IBC care. That is not something people will know. We don't have that standardization of care. But also, too, these dedicated clinics are also jumping in on the research game. So I'd like you to talk about that. And also, again, how hard is that? I bet that's a lot harder than people think.
Yeah. No, I think you're exactly right. So, when we started the IBC program and effort here at Ohio State, the first thing we did was focus on the clinical care delivery. And part of that is rapid access, because this is something where patients need to be seen quickly, need to be seen, need to get standard guideline concordant workup with the right imaging, all the right things have to happen in a very fast way. And so we had to bring in stakeholders from all over the university, schedulers, radiology. How can we get a PET scan as fast as possible? Make sure that everyone is aligned so that if someone calls in and gives even potential symptoms of inflammatory breast cancer, we trigger what we call our IBC rapid access, which opens every door and gets everybody on the same page immediately. This is something that we learned from some of our colleagues. And one of the things that we found pretty quickly is once we started to get the word out to our community and other places around the state, IBC is a rare disease. And community oncologists are incredible because they take care of everything, colon cancer, breast cancer, every type of cancer. And so an oncologist in the community may see one IBC every few years. And once some of our partners in the community learned that we had this dedicated program focus and rapid access, we've now started to see these points where providers who we know could take great care of it, but they know they can get everything done so quickly that we're getting those referrals to get those patients in. So it was not easy. I think medical centers are sort of like turning the big ship. It's like it's a slow curve, but we I think pushed the effort. We now have institution approved clinical practice guidelines so that everybody gets the exact same treatment, and we can track that as a quality metric. We are enhancing the number of patients that we're seeing as these referrals grow up, and then to your point, once we found that we were seeing enough IBC patients, then that really feeds into the research aspect. Because if you're only seeing 10 or 12 patients a year, you can do some things, but when you're seeing 20 or 30 patients a year and you're doing that year over year, the types of research that you can do can really grow. And so this has actually spurred multiple investigators at Ohio State who weren't doing IBC research to open parts of their lab or open new projects focused on IBC. So not only has it, we think, improved some of the care delivery, but it's bringing people in to do IBC research who didn't really maybe think of that as a focus before.
Well, and I love that. That's why I get excited, because I always tell women, if they can, try to get to a university-based center, because they don't realize how much that's driving research. And also, I think the average person doesn't realize that, if you're at a university-based hospital, you're just not given buckets of money to say, here, research this, research that. You have to get a grant to justify, and you have to have infrastructure, you have to have the cell lines, you have to have all these things. So it's not like you just get to always study your passion. So, maybe you can get, terrific, care on the outskirts of Ohio. But if you can get to that university-based center, at least, once in a while, you're driving research. Now, can we talk a little bit about that research struggle? And also, how I always feel like you researchers for IBC are real heroes because you're risking your careers. There's definitely things that you could do easier and make more money and not have to sweat that grant. And that's where
Yeah.
the IBC network comes in because we want to be there for you. But, I don't think that the average person realizes that's how this works.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's really, I think it's really important. So, the biggest funder of research for cancer is the National Institute of Health, the National Cancer Institute. But to get an NIH grant is very challenging. About 6%, so 6 out of every 100 grants submitted to the National Cancer Institute at the R01 level, which is the top level, are funded. So, already you're starting with a high bar. Then I think the other challenge is that, so if there is sort of limited resources and these grant study sections, which are reviewing hundreds of grants, look at things, they may look at a rare disease like IBC and say, this is a high-risk disease, we need more research here, but it is X% of all breast cancers. So maybe we should give the grant to the more common type of breast cancer that's going to potentially impact more patients. And so, I think that that's a little bit of a double whammy. The bar is hard, and then, getting that focus on a rare disease is another hurdle to jump. But
I
what we
always
know,
say,
go
I
ahead.
always say, I get it in the sense that they want to put their money where they think they can get the biggest bang for their buck.
Right.
And I get that. If you've got a dollar and you can help one person versus a dollar helping 100 people, you might want to go for the 100 people. But also, when you look at the fatality rate of IBC being so high, I kind of want to see that playing field leveled a little bit. But I do have sympathy. That's why we have the IBC network. And I'm glad you mentioned, the competition because you have to have the seed money to give the grant the meat to show those big guys, and you're scraping that out of your bucket. We've had several grants that we've given the seed money that have now gone to that level. So I tell people we're a good investment, but we want to be there for you to help you get that first science to hopefully give you that strong attractiveness to put IBC into the conversation.
Absolutely. And I think you've hit the nail on the head. I think the National Institutes of Health wants to fund research that's going to be successful. And so if you can build preliminary data, or sort of baseline work that shows this is a good bet, then you're going to jump over some of those hurdles and turn into the, fundable type of category. And grants from people like you and the IBC Network Foundation are that crucial, build that base. For example, one of the groups here at Ohio State that was just getting off the ground, focusing on IBC research is looking at cells involved in lymphedema or arm swelling in patients who have had IBC in the past, where the risk of lymphedema is quite high, and it's impactful symptomatically over the rest of a patient's life, really. And one of the cool things about this project is that it's a plastic surgeon who does unique procedures to bypass the lymphatics and relieve lymphedema with an immunologist, a scientist who has expertise in the immune system, and using a cutting-edge technology called single-cell sequencing to track the phenotype or the characteristics of the immune cells in patients with lymphedema and without lymphedema after IBC to try and understand some of the differences. Well, I think this is, cutting edge in about 3 different ways. It's IBC, it's lymphedema, it's single cell sequencing. So, if they just, threw in a grant to the NIH, I think it would be a high bar. But we've been able to, support their work with some pilot funds where they can start to enroll patients, get patients who are interested in research to consent to provide some blood samples and additional samples that can get that single cell sequencing done and show, hey, we can do this. We're seeing some really interesting results that could potentially be targeted. And, we think we're going to take the next step. And so, I think that some of that outside the box research, getting the first step into showing that it's possible with funds from IBC Network Foundation, I think otherwise we wouldn't even have a fighting chance. And now we're really excited. This is a new team, a team that we think could spend their career, looking at IBC as a team in science. And I think that's also inspiring that, you're bringing people who might not have thought about IBC, thinking about IBC where there's really such a critical need.
It's interesting too. You mentioned lymphedema. I have had lymphedema. I presented with lymphedema. My arm swelled and the breast swelled a few days later. So I've lived with significant lymphedema. I got all the way up to what they called a class 4. And I've had every surgery, and it's helping me, but I'm very grateful for the science that made my life better. I still have it. I will always have it, but it's definitely something more livable. But when I think about that, it leads to something. I often, when they say supposedly generic breast cancer, your risk of lymphedema is about 30%. And then with IBC, the joke amongst us is it's not if you get it, it's when you get it. It's highly likely you're going to get it. And one thing that I always shudder a little bit is I see well-intended surgeons sometimes say, let's don't remove all the nodes. Let's reduce your risk of lymphedema. And I know you're an oncologist, but you spend time with your surgeons and you know that that full nodal sweep is very important. Do you want to give a quick thought? Because I know I don't want to say you pass them down the line, but you each of you have your specialty and you trust the others. But where I see things go the most wrong is in surgery. And do you have some thoughts on that since we're talking about lymphedema?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this goes back to sort of our clinical practice guidelines that, we went through all the research, all the guidelines, talked to these other centers and, laid out what the expectation is. And, the surgeons, we have a couple here at Ohio State who focus on IBC are experts in this. Since they get to see many cases a year, they know the data, they know the guidelines, and you're going to get exactly the surgery that is appropriate based on the data that we have. This, I think, sort of goes back to the, the discussion we had, because there are excellent community breast surgeons for breast cancer care. And most of the breast cancer surgeries in the country don't happen at academic centers. But again, those surgeons may only see one or two every couple of years. And, if perhaps not quite up to date, haven't seen them, maybe there's some more data about avoiding lymphedema that's a little bit more. I think that really adds to the value of having, these dedicated centers and, guidelines that we're going to follow and track ourselves, and experts who, because it's a rare disease, making sure those are folks who see this 10, 15, 20 times a year, even if it's a rare cancer, and can deliver the best data-driven, guideline-driven care.
I don't want to put the blame on anybody. I'm not trying to blame anybody. I've seen excellent care in community centers. I've seen not good care in big centers. And I know sometimes patients will say, look, I really don't want that much happening. And I get the place where they want to give a patient a spot at the table, shall we say. And we want to get to say no to something. We're about to lose a breast. We're about to lose all these things. Can I say no to something that feels kind of good? But sometimes we don't know what choices we're saying yes or no to. And
Mhm.
that's where, when you can get to a specialty center, I think it's important. So now the clinic is how old would you say? I know it's more through some changes as
Yep.
you decided how to best go forward. And I think that was wise of you. And I love how much collaboration I've seen. It's incredible. And for you guys to be seeing 30, 40 patients a year is pretty incredible, because MD Anderson sees about 180 and Dana Farber is seeing about 150. So you guys are pulling up in there. Um, we don't want anybody to have it, but I'm glad that they're finding you.
Yeah. No,
So
we
what
have
do you what
seen.
do you feel is like the next steps for the clinic? How can people who care about what you do be involved? And then we can talk about the research too.
Absolutely, yeah. So we have definitely seen a steady growth, and since we started the clinic in 2021. So about 3 years. We
Great
had
time to do
elements.
something new, right? Anything in the 20s was like,
Yeah. Yeah. I think we had some of the bases of it back into 2020, but really the formal rollout. So, our growth continues. We discuss all the cases in the, once a week at our tumor board. We actually have a dedicated IBC flag within our tumor board. So we make sure that we identify those patients um,
great.
for tracking if they weren't captured on the way in. Even potential patients we flag because we want to make sure that we're not keep the funnel wide and identify these. And then the other piece is ensuring that we reach out to patients to ask their interest in participating in research. We partner with patients on all different levels. Some patients, maybe they're not quite ready, but a lot of patients at a minimum are willing to say, yeah, if there's leftover tissue after my surgery that's not needed for clinical diagnosis, if that could be used for research, that would be really valuable. If, I can give an extra tube of blood, or you can look at the clinical data in a de-identified way that I'm safe, and that can advance research, that is really valuable. So our translational breast cancer research program now has a dedicated clinical research assistant and a project manager who are focused on capturing or reaching out to all of these potential IBC patients and consenting them if they're willing, collecting some additional blood, collecting some clinical data and available tissue. And the first thing we did was sort of pool it all together. So once it's in one place, then it's a more organized resource for our researchers. And this has really, I think, spurred more research here at Ohio State. One particular researcher, Matthew Cherian, who's a medical oncologist and a scientist who has a lab, had primarily focused on triple negative breast cancer, also an important research area, but now has a whole section of his lab focused on IBC. And part of the reason he can do that now is because he has access to tissue and blood and other resources to study.
But that gets me really excited too, because also we know that they say the numbers maybe, and I'd like to know what you think. I'm hearing that 40% of IBCers are also triple negative.
Yeah,
You
there's
think that's a
definitely an
fair
overlap.
number?
Yeah, I think
Yeah, there's just that's a
yeah.
strong overlap, and it makes the disease more difficult. And so to have that marriage in that lab, I think is important. Now, so what would you like people to see or know about the research that's coming? And also, I want to back up a little bit because I am still excited from December when the San Antonio Breast Cancer Symposium had IBC on the People's Choice for the panel. That was the first time IBC presented for the main stage. And what is it? That was his 45th year or something. I
Yep.
don't think people know how big that is, but I think IBC is finally getting its due. What do you think?
I agree. I love that the idea was that it was the people's choice, which was, interested parties and participants voted on what they wanted to hear more about, focus on, have sessions on, and they voted for IBC because I think all of us see it. We know how impactful this is and how it has been a little bit less researched. And so I think that, there's sort of a groundswell of interest around elevating it. And we're happy to be part of that. We're glad that you are part of that. You, I think, are one of the loudest people that are bringing this to the forefront, which is what we need. I think any rare disease needs champions like you and like others in the field.
I always tell people I'm sorry I'm interrupting, but I always tell people I
Yeah,
don't do this because I had it. I do it because people still have it. I'm very grateful. I know I'm very fortunate and I'm standing on the shoulders of people who ran before me and scientists like you who are willing. I mean, you can make more money running a Botox clinic. I'm sorry, you could. I know it, right? It's true.
yeah.
So
Maybe
so
I need
feel
to
the
run one
love.
on the side and fund our IBC
I
research
don't
for the
know,
profits,
but
right?
feel the love, and I get very excited about talking to researchers, and also, the ones of you who are treating them, because I know you have a heart, and you go home at night when you've had a bad day. That bad day goes home with you, and I know several of the patients you've treated. I've watched you cheer on, and I've also talked to you when you've lost some patients, and I know that's not easy. So thank you for that. I feel like saying thank you for your service, like you would a soldier, because this is not easy. But there are successes and I
Mhm.
get very excited. So can we make a quick mention about research and
Yep.
then make sure I didn't miss anything that you wanted to talk about
Yeah, absolutely.
particularly?
Absolutely. So, I think We have I mentioned some of the lymphedema research. We're actually partnering with Dana-Farber to open a IBC-specific lymphedema study that they have here at Ohio State. We have a couple of IBC-specific clinical trials that we have opened and are opening. The other area that we are really excited about is Sachin Jawar, who's our section chief of breast radiation oncology, has a artificial intelligence angle to breast MRIs, because breast MRIs are being used more and more, and there are symptoms or features of IBC that could be picked up on breast MRIs. And his idea is that he has a tool that he's working to develop that might flag potential IBCs for reading radiologists who might see some swelling of the breast or some thickening of the skin or something like that. Maybe they would make a mention of it, but what if there was a flag that says, does this look like a potential inflammatory breast cancer? We think that that might, something like that could aid radiologists, might help identify these patients even sooner. So I think we're also getting into some of these cutting edge AI-based technologies, in addition to the basic science, like Matthew Cherian's mechanisms of IBC spread and lymphedema. But, as we talked about earlier, all of this, depends on some of those Kickstart funds. We are so excited about the science that's being developed here. And we believe that if we support that with research and with patients and with samples, but also with, with the financial support, that these researchers can get this off the ground and really have an impact on future diagnosis of IBC, future treatment of IBC, future prevention or treatment of some of the side effects of IBC treatments, trying to take the 360-degree view.
Love that. And to give somebody some backstory who might not know, one of the reasons I think this MRI stuff is so exciting, and it's incredibly exciting to hear, because we know that mammograms have a good place in the breast cancer world, but we also know that they don't always find anything with inflammatory, because a 10% have a lump. Mammograms are meant to have a lump. Sometimes it can find it, but it's not uncommon to have a clear mammogram, even with outward physical signs. Ultrasounds can be somewhat lacking, to say, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I've been reading that biopsies can have a false negative rate of 25% due to that web diffuse nature. So, you've got 3 tests that we all think are wonderful that can maybe mislead us, and then that MRI is that next place. So to strengthen that, because I've heard rumors that there's talk about skipping those 3 tests when there is a presentation to go straight to the MRI. That might be a long time in coming, but do you want to elaborate on any of that, or would you rather just kind of wait?
Yeah, no, I think
That's a lot to throw at you.
yeah, well, I think that the key point that you've really nailed is that breast imaging is a field that's changing. I think that trying to fit the right imaging approach for the right situation is dynamic. I think for the general population, mammogram is still a great technology, but we've realized that women with more dense breasts, maybe that's not good enough. And with women with symptoms, really maybe not good enough. And so then we have these new, ultrasounds, MRIs, contrast enhanced mammography. We have new technologies, and figuring out where to slot that in and how we can do it efficiently, I think is where we're headed. And that's why we believe that if there's going to be more MRIs that are being done, and this is one way where we could pick up inflammatory breast cancer, maybe even earlier if it happens to be caught, we want to make sure that that radiologists, have that thought in their mind. And we think that computer-assisted review might be some way that we could support earlier diagnosis.
Well, I think so too, because we don't know what stage 1 or stage 2 looks like for IBC. Wouldn't that be the thing that one day we see something, go, wait, this is not a stage 3? Wouldn't that be kind of cool?
It would be. That would be the dream, right? Yeah.
Now, I find you to be incredibly accessible. You are very active on Twitter, so they can find you through Stouffer Lab. But also, how would someone contact if they want to, become involved as an advocate, or if they want to become part of a clinical trial? Where would be their first place to go?
So we certainly at Ohio State welcome anyone, any patients or interested groups. We actually have a breast cancer scientific patient advisory council where we have a group of advocates dedicated to this, and we I think with the growth of the IBC program would really benefit from patient input and expertise on that. Our phone number 614-293-0066. As I mentioned, anybody who calls in to anywhere in the James, whether it's the breast number that I just mentioned or otherwise, if they have any symptoms concerning for IBC, we have this IBC rapid access protocol that gets triggered. So we actually have made it very broad. So however anybody tries to reach out, we're here. We have several clinical trials. We're actually building out our IBC program webpage where we're going to highlight those in addition to our general Ohio State breast cancer page. So I think we have a little pamphlet, and we're also getting out into the community nearby here. But we're always happy to, to hear from people, reach out to me or any of the other members of our team. And we also love input. I think we're always trying to get better and learn more and see how we can advance.
I think sometimes patients are a little bit intimidated to try to, because, it's a little daunting when you see all these letters behind your names. But
Yeah.
I can tell people from my personal experience, everyone has been very welcoming and you're treated with great respect. So if anybody wants to become involved in advocacy, please get past any kind of hurdle you might have and jump in there. And I think you're going to find it to be a very edifying experience. Well, how do you want to wrap this up? I am just beyond excited about what is happening in Ohio. Partly, yes, I knew Lori, and this it gives me some comfort that something that would have made her proud has happened, and her family's been incredible to be supportive of this, but also just for the women in the area to get what they need. I'm just so happy.
Well, thanks. Yeah, when I go out and speak in the community, I always sort of end my talks with two words, hope and urgency, because I believe that all the research that we're doing, having more programs, more rapid access, gives us hope that we're going to capture IBC early. It's going to get treated well. We're going to have better outcomes. We're doing more research that is going to turn into new treatments and better treatments, but also the urgency that we need to do better. We need to raise funds that can support research for IBC, because there are patients like Lori and others who, I see every week who still are dealing with IBC. It's still something that we're facing. And so we can build on that hope, but keep that urgency to continue to make this top of mind and push forward to develop new treatments, diagnostics, and hopefully cures for IBC.
I would love that. Well, thank you for giving us this time today. I know you have a heavy workload, but we're talking to Dr. Daniel Stover at Ohio State Comprehensive Cancer Center. Did I say it right? The
Perfect.
James is people refer to it a lot. You can find him on what was called Twitter, which is now X. It's Stover Lab, or you can contact the IBC Network, and we'll be happy to connect you up. And thank you again for your time. And I really, really appreciate your dedication to this disease.
Thank you so much, Terry. Appreciate you having me on today.